This morning, October 16th, Moscow woke up to what officials are already calling an unprecedented technical incident. But behind that vague phrase lies something far more serious: a sudden, coordinated strike on one of Russia's most critical energy facilities. According to multiple sources in the energy sector, a massive explosion ripped through the Ryazan oil refinery shortly after dawn, triggering fires visible for miles and forcing an immediate shutdown of operations. The plant, one of the largest in western Russia, processes more than 10% of the country's domestic fuel supply. Within hours, the Ministry of Emergency Situations declared a localized fire. But satellite data reviewed by independent analysts suggests widespread structural damage. For a government already struggling to maintain the illusion of control, this was a direct hit, both literally and symbolically. At first, state media tried to frame the event as a minor malfunction, broadcasting footage of smoke rising over the industrial zone and claiming that the situation is under control. But eyewitness videos tell another story. Columns of black smoke towered into the morning sky, while emergency crews rushed to contain a blaze that appeared to have spread across multiple refining units. Local residents reported hearing at least 2 distinct explosions before the fire began. One described the shockwave as strong enough to rattle windows across the entire district. Soon after, the refinery's power grid failed, forcing a total shutdown of production lines. It's not just fire damage, one source at the scene told us. It looks like something hit them from above. The phrase "from above" has triggered speculation across both Russian and international channels. Analysts are now debating whether this was an industrial accident, a cyber-induced explosion, or a targeted drone strike. Ukrainian media have not confirmed involvement, but Western intelligence sources suggest the scale and precision of the blast point to an external attack. For the Kremlin, the optics are devastating. A key refinery, deep inside the country, disabled in broad daylight, and no clear explanation. If drones reach this far, it means Moscow's air defenses are no longer impenetrable, noted one European defense expert. And that changes everything. But beyond the security implications lies an economic nightmare. Fuel distribution networks rely heavily on Ryazan's output, and its sudden loss is already causing supply disruptions across central Russia. Several gas stations in nearby regions have reported shortages, while long lines of vehicles began forming by mid-morning. The Ministry of Energy has promised to redirect flows from other facilities, yet insiders quietly admit that those reserves are limited. With domestic fuel prices already at record highs, even a brief interruption could trigger panic buying. And panic is exactly what the government cannot afford right now. Inside Moscow, the tone has shifted from denial to anxiety. Officials are holding emergency meetings behind closed doors, while local authorities have increased security around other refineries and fuel depots. Anonymous telegram channels linked to military circles describe a state of high alert, though official spokespeople refuse to comment on any operational changes. For now, the public is being told that the fire is under control and fuel supplies remain stable. But as one senior energy analyst told US This Morning, when they repeat those phrases too often, it usually means the opposite. And yet, the deeper question remains unanswered. How did an attack reach so far, so suddenly, and with such precision? According to early assessments, the Ryazan site was supposed to be among the best protected in the country. Its air defense perimeter was upgraded just months ago. And still, within minutes, the heart of Russia's refining system was engulfed in flames. That contradiction between confidence and vulnerability may be the most dangerous revelation of all. Because what happened this morning is not just an isolated disaster, it's a signal. And by the time Moscow realizes who sent it, the message may already be too late. By mid-morning, the extent of the Ryazan disaster was becoming impossible to disguise. Satellite imagery analyzed by multiple defense agencies confirmed that the strike, whether airborne or internal, had crippled at least 3 major refining units, including the catalytic cracking complex responsible for gasoline production. What's more, the images revealed burn scars across an unusually wide radius, indicating either multiple detonations or secondary explosions caused by stored fuel. In simple terms, the refinery isn't damaged, it's out of commission. They'll need months to rebuild, if at all. One Western energy analyst told us, "This isn't repair work. This is reconstruction." Inside Russia, the first signs of panic appeared not in the streets, but in the markets. Fuel futures on the St. Petersburg exchange spiked within hours, triggering automatic suspensions on several contracts. The ruble, already under pressure, tumbled again, while social media channels began circulating reports of rising gasoline prices in Tula, Vladimir, and Tambov. Official spokesmen insist there is no reason for concern. Yet the government's own energy data portal briefly went offline, an indication, according to cyber specialists, that they were rushing to edit the numbers. One Moscow economist summed it up dryly. When the statistics go dark, the situation is worse than they're saying. But the shock runs deeper than economics. For years, Russian officials have built an image of technological invulnerability. The idea that strategic sites, especially those tied to the oil industry, are shielded by layers of defenses. The Ryazan explosion shattered that myth in a single morning. Military insiders now acknowledge that the country's interior air defense grid is overstretched, with key radar units redeployed to protect border regions. There are gaps, and someone has learned how to exploit them, said a source close to the defense ministry. He added that internal investigations are already looking at the possibility of sabotage, a word the Kremlin avoids, but everyone now whispers. Meanwhile, the human cost is slowly emerging. Local hospitals have confirmed at least a dozen injured workers, several in critical condition. Emergency responders are working under strict information controls, forbidden to speak with journalists. Yet leaked audio from first responders, reviewed by our newsroom, suggests confusion on the ground. Fire crews complained of delayed orders and lack of access to water lines. One voice, nearly drowned by background noise, can be heard saying, "We weren't warned. Nobody was ready." It's a chilling detail that underlines the scale of unpreparedness at every level. And as the fire burns out, the political firestorm is only beginning. Within the Kremlin, the hunt for accountability has started. Insiders describe growing tension between the Ministry of Defense, which oversees aerial security, and Rosneft, which operates the refinery. Each side is blaming the other for operational negligence. The president's spokesperson appeared on state television briefly, calling the incident a test of resilience. But his tone was brittle, the phrasing careful. There was no mention of foreign involvement, no threats of retaliation, only the familiar call for unity. It was, in its way, the clearest sign yet that Moscow itself was caught off guard. Still, beyond the official silence, questions multiply. How could such a strike bypass hundreds of kilometers of supposed defenses? Who provided the coordinates? And why Ryazan, of all targets, deep inside the country, symbolic of industrial pride? One security source suggested a possibility few dared to voice. It wasn't chosen for tactical value. It was chosen for message value. If that's true, the message is clear. Russia's heartland is no longer safe. And inside the walls of power, that realization is spreading faster than the flames ever could. By noon, Moscow's illusion of control had begun to fracture. The official narrative, a technical malfunction swiftly contained, was collapsing under the weight of visual evidence. Satellite feeds, eyewitness footage, and even foreign media broadcasts showed a reality that state television could no longer edit away. The Ryazan refinery, one of the backbone facilities of Russia's fuel infrastructure, was still burning. Thick black smoke was drifting over the industrial outskirts, while nearby districts were being quietly evacuated. In local chat groups, residents posted images of ash-coated cars and the faint chemical smell in the air. Authorities called it safe levels of emissions. People stopped believing. Behind closed doors, the situation took on a darker tone. Emergency briefings at the Ministry of Energy stretched into hours, with top officials from Rosneft, the Security Council, and the Defense Ministry reportedly present. According to a source familiar with those discussions, the atmosphere was unusually tense, almost accusatory. The key question wasn't how to fix the refinery. It was how to prevent panic. Early drafts of an official statement mentioning possible external interference were withdrawn at the last minute. The instruction from the top was clear: no speculation, no blame, no weakness. They're terrified of admitting vulnerability, the source said, because the moment they do, the narrative collapses. Meanwhile, the economic ripples intensified. Truckers across central Russia began reporting shortages of diesel, with some companies halting deliveries altogether. Fuel terminals in Bryansk and Kaluga were instructed to prioritize state needs, effectively freezing civilian distribution. This sudden tightening was felt instantly. Long queues at gas stations, price spikes on the black market, and growing anxiety among logistics firms. We've seen this pattern before, one analyst told us. They call it redistribution. It's really rationing. For ordinary citizens, the word shortage has reappeared in daily conversations, a ghost from decades past returning to the surface. The Kremlin's communication strategy followed its familiar rhythm: denial, deflection, and defiance. Yet this time, something was missing: the tone of certainty. Even the most loyal news anchors struggled to sound convincing. Segments praising the swift response of emergency services were interrupted by footage too grim to match the script. And the public mood, though muted, began to shift from curiosity to quiet alarm. If they can't protect Ryazan, one online commenter wrote before his post was deleted, what else can't they protect? It's a question that security officials, despite their silence, are now asking too. Inside the defense establishment, the first cracks of internal dissent are emerging. Some officers privately admit that radar coverage over central Russia has been compromised for months due to stretched resources. Others hint at possible insider complicity, that someone with access to technical schematics might have passed targeting data to a hostile actor. It doesn't have to be foreign intelligence, one retired general warned. It could be someone inside, sending a signal. That phrase, sending a signal, has since surfaced repeatedly in intelligence chatter, whether metaphor or reality. It captures the unease now gripping Moscow's inner circle. But perhaps the most revealing detail came from an unexpected corner. Late this morning, a leaked internal memo from the Ministry of Transport circulated among journalists. It contained a single line of understated urgency. Prepare for disruptions in domestic fuel logistics over the next 72 hours. No explanations, no forecasts, just an implicit acknowledgement that the situation is far from contained. If the government expects chaos, it means they're already living in it. Still, the most unsettling part of today's events isn't the explosion, nor the shortages, nor even the panic in the markets. It's what the Ryazan attack represents. The first undeniable proof that Russia's strategic heart can be struck without warning. And for a leadership built on the promise of strength, that realization is existential. The question now isn't whether Moscow can restore control. It's whether it still remembers what control means. And as the smoke continues to rise, that answer is becoming harder to find. By early afternoon, the tone in Moscow had shifted from controlled confusion to outright unease. The President's Security Council convened an emergency session, officially, to assess industrial safety measures, but insiders describe a far more urgent atmosphere. According to two officials briefed on the meeting, the agenda centered not on reconstruction, but on prevention, how to stop another strike before nightfall. They weren't discussing repairs, one participant said. They were discussing the next target. The Air Defense Command was reportedly ordered to reposition several units closer to Moscow's industrial ring, a move that effectively admits what the Kremlin refuses to say aloud. The interior is exposed. Meanwhile, the narrative battle intensified. State broadcasters began running synchronized reports about foreign provocation, though without naming any country. The tone was defensive, uncertain, a sign that even propagandists were unsure which version of events would hold. A televised statement from the Energy Ministry, meant to project calm, instead deepened suspicion. The minister spoke of a localized incident, but his expression betrayed strain. Online viewers noticed. Within minutes, the clip spread across social media under the caption, "He knows." The phrase became a trending tag before moderators could remove it. It was a small crack in the information wall, but a telling one. Russians are starting to read between the lines again. On the ground, the consequences of the refinery shutdown continued to unfold. Supply trucks were rerouted toward emergency depots near Moscow, creating massive traffic jams on the M5 highway. Police set up temporary checkpoints to prevent panic purchases, yet the sight of fuel convoys under escort only heightened anxiety. Several independent monitoring groups reported that gas prices in some central regions had risen by nearly 15% since morning, while rumors of rationing spread faster than officials could deny them. "The government always says it's temporary," said one logistics manager from Ryazan, "but temporary in Russia can mean forever." Internationally, the response was immediate and cautious. Western defense analysts, noting the precision of the strike, speculated that it marked a turning point in the conflict, a demonstration that strategic depth no longer guarantees safety. Meanwhile, Asian energy markets reacted nervously to potential disruptions in Russian exports. For years, Moscow had used oil as its geopolitical shield. Today, that shield cracked in full view of the world. "This isn't just a refinery," said one senior European diplomat. "It's the symbol of a regime that can't protect its own arteries." Inside the Kremlin, fear of that symbolism runs deep. Several ministries have already requested expanded security budgets, while others are quietly purging mid-level officials blamed for negligence. But the real problem lies higher. The attack on Ryazan has exposed fractures in the command hierarchy, overlapping jurisdictions, miscommunication, and, perhaps most dangerously, mistrust. "They've built a system where everyone reports success, no matter the outcome," said a former government advisor. "Now, when something truly fails, nobody knows what's real." That uncertainty is now seeping upward, eroding the very image of invincibility that once defined the Russian state. And yet, as dramatic as this moment feels, insiders insist it's only the beginning. According to sources in the energy sector, the country's refining grid is far more fragile than publicly admitted. Several other plants operate with outdated safety systems, vulnerable to both cyber and kinetic attacks. One classified report, circulated among senior officials this afternoon, allegedly warned that current defensive capacity is insufficient to guarantee security of inland energy infrastructure. The phrase, sterile as it sounds, carries a devastating implication. If another strike comes, Russia may not be able to stop it. Still, there's one more layer to this story, one that even the most connected insiders hesitate to discuss. Because behind the flames, the shortages, and the denials, something else is happening. A quiet, coordinated movement inside the elite itself. A shift from loyalty to self-preservation. For years, Moscow's power brokers believed the system could absorb any shock. But as one Kremlin economist confided to us this afternoon, now they're realizing the shocks are coming from within. And that, perhaps, is the most dangerous fire of all, the one burning where no one dares to look. By the end of this day, October 16th, Moscow finds itself staring into an unfamiliar silence. The flames at Ryazan have mostly subsided, but what remains is worse, a smoldering monument to the end of certainty. Officials insist the situation is stabilized, yet no one inside the system truly believes it. The Ministry of Energy speaks of recovery operations. The Defense Ministry mentions heightened vigilance. And the Kremlin, in its evening statement, avoids the word attack altogether. Each department clings to its fragment of narrative, as if repeating it might make it true. But outside the marble corridors, Russia feels different tonight. Something intangible has cracked. Across the country, that fracture manifests in small but unmistakable ways. Fuel trucks idling at depots, waiting for new instructions. Commuters glancing nervously at half-empty gas stations. A line of military transport vehicles seen moving through Kolomna, their headlights cutting through the dusk. Officially, these are routine exercises. Unofficially, they are a symptom of fear. Fear of the next hit. Fear of the next headline. In the capital's cafes, the conversation has shifted. People no longer ask whether the explosion was sabotage. They ask how close the next one will be. "It's the first time in years," a Moscow resident told us quietly, "that we don't feel untouchable." Inside government circles, the mood is equally subdued. Several insiders describe a strange stillness in the Kremlin halls, fewer voices, shorter meetings, more guarded faces. The president's aides are said to be reviewing contingency plans for critical infrastructure continuity, a phrase that sounds bureaucratic but carries the weight of panic. According to one source close to the administration, they're preparing for the possibility that this wasn't a one-off incident. And behind those words lies a truth few dare to articulate. If Ryazan could be struck, so could others, Kurishi, Nizhnekamsk, even the outskirts of Moscow itself. The once unthinkable now feels like a countdown. Yet the most revealing reactions are not coming from generals or ministers. They're coming from the oligarchs. Within hours of the explosion, at least 3 prominent businessmen reportedly requested permission to relocate their families abroad temporarily. 2 others, according to financial intermediaries, began transferring liquid assets through foreign subsidiaries. It's not panic, one analyst told us. It's preemption. The elite understands what the public is only beginning to sense. The era of absolute safety is over. The architecture of control, built over decades through propaganda, surveillance, and fear, is trembling from a single, well-aimed shockwave. Internationally, the symbolism of this attack has already reshaped the conversation. Western officials, careful not to claim responsibility or knowledge, describe it as a strategic awakening. Energy analysts talk of cascading consequences, disrupted exports, new insurance risks, rising global prices. But within Russia, the implications are more psychological than material. The myth of invulnerability, the foundation of the modern state's power narrative, has been punctured. For a government that thrives on the illusion of control, this loss of faith may prove more damaging than the explosion itself. They can rebuild refineries, said a senior European diplomat tonight. They can't rebuild belief. And so, as the smoke fades into the cold October air, the question hanging over Moscow is not how to recover, but how to continue. The Ryazan explosion will be remembered not just as a strike on an oil plant, but as the moment when the heart of Russia's power structure began to flicker. In the coming weeks, there will be speeches of defiance, promises of retaliation, and endless reassurances of strength. But beneath them all will run the same quiet fear, that the country's enemies are no longer outside its borders, but inside its own systems, its own complacency, its own myths. Because every empire falls first in the mind, long before it falls on the map. And today, that process may have begun. The lights are still on in Moscow. The broadcasts still play. The anthem still echoes at dawn. But the confidence has drained away. What remains is vigilance, uncertainty, and a single, unspoken realization that Russia's greatest threat is no longer the enemy it names, but the fragility it can no longer deny. And for those who still follow this story, for those who sense that this moment marks more than a single explosion, stay with us. The aftermath will reveal not just how deep the damage runs, but whether Moscow can survive the truth it spent years trying to hide.